Kia ora everyone, welcome to another G News update. Well, I'm standing here out on the mudflats at Blackpool in Waiheke Island, and this is the place where you get godwits. As I've mentioned on a couple of other occasions, there's about 50 odd godwits that live here in these flats here, and they'll be basically like ghost birds that you don't really see very often. But as you know, these are godwits that are famous for packing up their bags and migrating all the way to China and then off to Alaska and then all the way back every year, whether young or old. That's a hell of a long way to travel. And so they come back here, and you can often see the godwits here just gathered around the water's edge. It's low tide right now in Blackpool on Saturday morning, the 6th of September. Well, why is that day important? Well, today's the voting day in the Tamaki Makaurau by-election, and most of the reports so far suggest that there's going to be a very, very low vote turnout. And of course, the National Party aren't putting anybody up in either ACT or NZ First, because I guess at the end of the day, those parties don't represent Maori interests, and certainly not Maori Forever. And wasn't it great to see Queenie speak for the first time during the week as we all witness that there is a better way. There's a much better way, and there's a forever pathway for all of us together under Te Treaty. So what I wanted to talk about this morning wasn't by-elections or voter turnout, but really just 3 or 4 topics that have been in the news. One of those topics that was in the news was the way in which Auckland's Transport Authority, AT, has been stripped of all of its powers and basically relegated to being just an operational service, while Simeon Brown and Chris Bishop stood on either side of Wayne Brown yesterday and made this announcement. For those that actually do pay attention, this isn't really new. It's been in the cooker for some time. We've seen this coming, and basically the concern that I guess I would raise about it all would probably come down to the way in which there's going to be a regional panel, a committee, which is being described as a 50-50 split between big central government and Auckland Council, with 3 representatives each, making up 6 on this panel, which will make decisions that are supposedly joined up about the future of Auckland transport. Well, as you know, there's this other factor there, the so-called independent chair, who will be about as independent as somebody appointed by the New Zealand Initiative or the Atlas Network or Davy Boy, take your pick, because they're basically all the same thing. Now, Wayne Brown basically made a bit of a jerk of himself yesterday when answering questions, because he's not very good in public, and that's probably why he's been avoiding all of those debates, because he doesn't want the public to see his big weakness, which is that he can't speak in public very well. He's all over the place and he's a bit crotchety. Anyway, when he was answering questions, it was put to him why we're doing this, and would the people that represent local communities on local boards actually have the skills to make decisions about roads? Anyway, Wayne Brown said something along the lines of, well, I'm not convinced that those at Auckland Transport had any skills when it came to transport or roads. And then he went on and said that your local board members probably need something to do to pass the time, that they're implying that they're all just sitting around doing nothing all day, and that this would actually keep them busy, which was very, very insulting. And it wasn't the first insult from Wayne Brown this week. You all heard him going on about Polynesian victims and being victims, having a victim mindset. And so it's understandable why the people that are actually trying to get Wayne Brown re-elected are keeping him away from media, because every time he opens his mouth, there's some shocking stuff that comes out of it that's just not cool. Anyway, yeah, so this is one of the points made by Simon Wilson, that whoever you're going to vote in your local elections for local board better have some kind of background or experience in transport. So you might want to look a bit more carefully at who you're voting for when your packs come in the post and you have this great list of names you have to tick off, but you don't know anything about it because basically a lot of people don't really get into it enough. Here on Waiheke Island, we have something like about a 60% voter turnout for local elections, which is well above the norm. So there's a great little, very engaged democracy here on this island, but it's not the case everywhere. So, you know, who we vote for counts, and we've got to vote for people that actually know what they're doing. And it's more than just deciding where a bus stop should go, right? Anyway, so that was the first topic, was this taking over by big central government of local voice and dressing it up and pretending that this is about local decision making and democracy returning. We've also heard news on BHN, some really good reporting there, and congratulations to BHN for having Melanie Nelson and Ryan Ward on their show. I think it was last night or the night before, and basically this was all about the way in which a certain member of the NZ initiative, who's been around for a very long time, had been lobbying at the very top levels of the regulatory agency that has been put in place by Davy Boy. So this is kind of like corrupt lobbying basically going on, where some private individual has unusual access and influence at a very top level about how laws are designed, what criteria we use to assess law. And basically this was titled, it was all based on a Substack article recently written by Ryan Ward, who's been around for some time now, ringing the bells for us about the Regulatory Standards Bill and other deregulation. Ryan Ward is an academic at Otago, specialising in psychiatry, I think. But anyway, he's been political in writing for us, as has researcher and Maori language expert translator Melanie Nelson. Melanie Nelson's been on G News before, but anyway, the point of this was really about Bryce Wilkinson. Bryce Wilkinson, as you know, wrote the original tome back in about 2001, something like that, that Davy Boy referred to when Davy Boy was introducing the Regulatory Standards Bill earlier last year and this year, and we all went away to Christmas, and I read this book by Bryce Wilkinson. In the first few chapters, the entire focus of Bryce Wilkinson's work is based on an American called Richard Epstein. So New Zealand has its own Epstein files. The controversy of it all, the Epstein files in New Zealand are about this American coming in and talking about the concept of being paid compensation for regulatory takings. So this is about something called private property absolutism being embedded into our laws, being embedded at the highest levels. And the way to do that is to lobby with Davy Boy, get Davy Boy to bring in your regulation agency, then get to the very top of that, and Bryce Wilkinson from the NZ Initiative, the Atlas Network think tank, who has from the very start over the last four attempts to get this regulatory standards bill embedded into New Zealand neoliberalism, into our laws so it becomes a norm, was in there. And Ryan Ward had actually done some OIAs and uncovered a whole lot of activity that's really, really dodgy. For example, he cited how there was a time where Bryce Wilkinson from the NZ Initiative was emailing Davy Boy and asking, is it safe for me to email you, because this is dodgy shit that's going on. And yeah, Bryce Wilkinson didn't want to be hauled up for what he was doing, but he had this unusual amount of influence at the very top there. And it's the kind of stuff that happens in New Zealand. And Epstein had kind of like really warned against defining what they mean by private property when they say that there should be an expectation that you get compensation for anything that touches private property. Now, so for those of you that have been paying attention, what this really means is if there's a treaty claim, if the treaty's involved, if there's anything to do with the treaty, if there's anything to do with the environment, if you care about nature or anything or your environment, then huge amounts of money will have to be paid out to developers, private people that need to be paid out. And this will become the law because Bryce Wilkinson's managed to embed this crap at the top. And Davy Boy's defended it. And at the end of the day, Christopher Luxon signed this off in a coalition deal. And the question was raised, did he know what he was doing? Was he really that stupid that he had years and years to understand as a person that was brought into Parliament, sitting in the back row, what this localism business was, what this lobbying business was, and yet still in the negotiations he signs it all off. And is it deliberate? Is he on board? Well, I know for a fact that since this time, Christopher Luxon's actually gone on record and said that he believes the Regulatory Standards Bill, after all of the objections from Jane Kelsey, after everything that was said by Palmer and different academics that went before the Select Committee, our Prime Minister, Mr. Fig Jam Luxcon, basically still said that he thought this was all about increasing productivity, but it's all going to slow everything down. It's a terrible, terrible imposition. It's about lobbying at the top, and Ryan Ward's article and Substack, cross-referenced with Melanie Nelson, really brought a good focus on this on BHN. So well done, you guys, for covering that topic and exposing to New Zealanders this private property absolutism from the United States, our very own Epstein files, via Bryce Wilkinson, from the NZ Initiative, and how he's managed to get at the very top of the regulatory agency there, the regulations agency, and get in the ear of the people that are actually setting the criteria at the very top for appointments. So this is dodgy stuff, New Zealand. This is dodgy stuff. So yes, this regulatory standards lobbying at the very top, embedding the private property absolutism at the very top, trying to make it a norm. This is embedding more neoliberalism. And as Jane Kelsey pointed out, it's like, old wine in new bottles being presented for the fourth time. And this is the kind of slippery way in which Bryce Wilkinson has managed to get to the top and impose what the Atlas Network wants for all New Zealand lawmaking. And good on BHN for bringing Ryan Ward and Melanie onto the show and putting a spotlight on that. In other news, we also had a week where the man bun was away, Lion Ryan. And so we had the guy from Business Desk presenting, and we had Trish Schersh on in there along with Royden Christie, who was an ex-TV guy, basically saying it's no longer a matter of if Christopher Luxon will be rolled, but it's just a matter of how. So the discussion now is about how he will be rolled, and speculation about this now amounted to, we're waiting for some good news. We're waiting for something to say, well, look, I have delivered, very much like in the ferries debacle when the pink pantsuit got up there and said, I have delivered the ferries, which was a total lie. She'd sat on her hands for a year and cost us all so much money, $671 million. But now the speculation is there'll be some kind of, good news, and then there'll be some kind of organized event that says, look, I'm going back to America. I've done what I came here to do. I've achieved everything I set out to do. Now it's over to this new person, Nicola Willis, the new Prime Minister, will look after things heading into the next election. Or maybe it's Chris Bishop. We've got Project 11 obviously happening, and it's going to be a kind of a surprise. It's not going to be what we expect. So this was the talk during the week. So it's no longer a matter of if Christopher Luxon's going to be rolled, it's just how. And they'll try and do it nicely. That's the latest speculation that we're actually hearing even at the Herald. So in further news, we had Bernard Hickey over on the Kaka telling us that, yes, there's been some information come out of Westpac where their chief economist is arguing now for a sort of the midpoint when it comes to the inflation range to be raised from 2% to 2.5%. So what does that mean? Well, basically all that means is that the long-term and 25-year average when it came to where inflation sits is closer to 2.5%, and that would mean that there'd be less unemployment and consequential effects if it would be a bit more stimulatory for growth, etc., if we just left the range creep up by 0.5%. So I don't know how important that is, but what it did also kind of get into there with Bernard was how there's been quite a bit of migrant exploitation going on. And this involves people coming to New Zealand and being stuffed into quarters that are really meant for 5 or 6 people, but putting about 18 people in there, and employers getting away with this stuff. Now, this kind of thing linked into sort of how we try and grow the economy, you know, by raising the price of houses, but we also bring in a lot of cheap labor, and then there's all this migrant exploitation. So that's the kind of stuff that happens in New Zealand because we don't actually bite the bullet and do the proper things. We keep re-electing National, and they keep on bringing in all of this migrant workforce that they underpay, and then there's all this abuse. And one of those forms of abuse is apparent that we set up all these liquor shops, you know, in these small communities. Which brings me on to the final topic I wanted to talk about today, and that was that Gary Pienda, the doctor from up north that has been speaking out about ED situations up in Whangarei and in similar places. He's got his own podcast these days, and he had a couple of experts that advise about alcohol harm. And this all linked back to the way that Nicole McKee had recently switched a cabinet paper that got leaked from being concerned about the burden of harm on society and then going, oh, look, I don't care about harm. This is the ACT Party. What we care about is the regulatory burden, the amount of forms you have to fill in, how hard it is to actually get a liquor license, how hard it is to protest against one. So the guts of this ended up being about how alcohol has, in recent studies, been proven to be New Zealand's most harmful drug. It's by far the most harmful. And the areas of harm, they include things like accidental self-injury, the injury to other people because you get violent. Some people do when they drink too much. The way in which all those people go to EDs with alcohol-related harm, injuries, problems, all those car crashes that are caused by alcohol. Not only are there all these physical harms that are caused, but there's cancer that's grown. There's 7 types of cancer related to drinking too much alcohol, or just, more than 2.5 standard drinks a week basically will put you at risk and put you in that group of being at risk of getting cancer. Then there's all those costs that come from treating cancer. Then there's other kinds of harm as well, which are wider. So if you've got somebody that's alcoholic in the family and it causes a breakup, you've got violence in the home and it's fueled by alcohol, you've got depression that's made worse, you've got mental problems, mental health suffers with and is exacerbated by alcohol. Alcohol is just bad news, basically, too much alcohol, but we all love a good drink. And so Nicole McKee, what was she in there doing? She was increasing the harm. The ACT Party wanted to harm New Zealand society far more. So anyone that's got a background in the actual real harm and knows the truth about all this and isn't just like, oh, get it down, yeah. Basically, those kind of people are saying, well, look, this is really, really bad. You know, Nicole McKee is making it far worse. And but the point that I wanted to make was that Gary Pienda highlighted the way in which the decks are stacked again. The ACT Party hate these local communities. They really despise local voice. And Nicole McKee had made it impossible for anyone to pitch up and protest against more liquor stores unless you're locally affected, unless you're very, very local. And they pointed out that the locals, they're not Top Gun lawyers, are they? They're not like big-time prosecutors, you know, that are skilled at argument and undermining the opposition. These people are busy workers, people in a community. They're often someone, you know, young or someone in their older years that is busy, you know, trying to make ends meet. And they have to come together and defend their case against high-powered lawyers, because on the ACT Party side of things, on the government side of things, high-paid, very highly equipped lawyers are allowed to go all around the country. There's no restriction on them. They don't have to be local. this crack team comes in and it makes sure that alcohol gets put into the hands of your community, and there's more alcohol. And they basically, the corporates, they basically target these communities, and they want them all on the alcohol, and they want that big money from addiction. And so this is Nicole McKee, and this is the ACT Party, and this is what you get when 8% of the vote rolls over a very, very poor muppet of a leader, Christopher Luxon, Mr. Fig Jam. And yeah, look, I kind of got interrupted earlier a little bit, and I hadn't quite finished with this other thing. That was those announcements, wasn't it? Those announcements that were made, like the Amazon Web Services and this IKEA announcement, which were kind of botched, but it's all part of that bigger pattern of taking credit for things that are already done. And what it did raise a flag about was that how can this administration be allowing Christopher Luxon to go out there, shoot his mouth off, and make a big deal about things that are old news? Where's the scrutiny? Why isn't there anybody around Chris Luxon saying, don't do that? Look, that was actually just so obvious that you're going to be caught. You're going to be found out. You're going to be made into a fool. And so if you step back from this and you look at Project 11, the plan to get rid of Luxon, it's basically probable that they're giving this egg enough rope to hang himself to just continue being a fool. But if he's going to do a graceful exit, well, they're going to have to make something up, because school absences, he said he got into politics because he couldn't believe that we had so many children not going to school. Well, it's actually got worse under Davey Boy, hasn't it? It got worse. Term 2 results this year were worse than the absenteeism in 2020. So I don't know what the good news story for Christopher Luxon is going to be. Maybe it's not going to be the June quarter GDP. According to Bernard, that's basically blown as well, based on all of the residential building data, which has actually gone through the floor. And that all relates to the way in which this government stalled construction and forced 16,000 people out of work. This is just terrible neoliberalism. So I write about it this morning. It's going to rain, and I think that's probably enough for one Saturday morning. The All Blacks are playing today. We've got these elections locally, so go out and vote if you remember to. Try and make an effort to discover who your local board candidates are, who you're voting for, if you're voting for the mayor and the council. But I would say that Wayne Brown doesn't deserve your vote, because he doesn't show up to debates, and he slags off people, and basically, I don't know why we have him as a mayor. We've got Kieran Leone, who I reckon people should vote for. So vote for Kieran. And don't forget the big protest against genocide next Saturday at 9:30 at Stafford Park in Northcote, where we're going to walk the bridge, and we're going to stand up for people who are being systematically killed, starved to death, and shoved off their land and dispossessed by Israel in a genocide. Because remember, 86% of 500 genocide scholars say this is absolutely genocide on all of the criteria. That's all from me today. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.